Look, Trevor, forget. That's just for you, Jeff. You can't even see. Okay, today on SDL, we're going to talk about your crypto identity and how you might better be identified in the real world. So stick around for Secure Digital Life.
This is a Security Weekly production.
Welcome to Secure Digital Life. And you type in AAA porn or whatever it is you're typing in. I'm sorry. I was at a PG show.
And I'm really excited to be here.
I'm glad you're here because somebody needs to know what's going on.
That's right.
Okay, so now
somebody has to drink this.
I think it's another day. It's another episode.
Yeah, he's looking at the wrong camera.
Oh, you put my camera over here. Cut. Basically, forget you ever saw that. I think actually forgetting you ever saw that would really be a good idea at this point. SANS Pen Test is coming up this week. So if you're in the D.C. area, SANS Pen Test will be in Bethesda on Sunday through Tuesday. The Security Weekly crew will be there, not me, alas. But if you're around, you should go check it out because SANS Pen Test is always fun. Ed Scotus and all those guys building cool things to like abuse people with, or maybe you get to abuse them. I'm not sure. It's just a big festival of self-abuse.
Beefabuse.com?
Beefabuse, yeah, .com. Beefinvolvement.com.
Oh, right.
Yeah, okay. Today we're going to talk a little bit about crypto identities leading up to talking, hopefully, about cryptocurrencies in the near future because someone asked us to do that out in South Dakota. So we're going to be doing that for you soon. But we're going to talk today a little bit about how all these things start being put together to create crypto identities for individuals. And the way that that's been done throughout history is either with a number, like a social security number, or a driver's license number, or some kind of number like that, which is not obviously very effective. And now in the modern age, we often see passwords being used as a means of identity, or even worse, PIN numbers, which forever and ever a PIN number meant four things, and guessing, from 0 to 9999 is just not that really hard to do. And I'm always shocked when people ask for PIN numbers, and that's what they still use to identify people. And I mean, even banks until recently were using 4-digit PIN numbers to log into teller machines.
They still are.
Oh, they are?
Yeah.
Oh, mine doesn't.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
You put your card in, it's 4-digit PIN.
Well, we're all going down to Russ's bank. I'll be checking that out real soon.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's been kind of the tradition throughout history. And as people started talking about how do we do this better, so this was sort of the thing that started developing was what should you do? And we've all seen movies where we had all kinds of elaborate things and eyeballs on sticks and all sorts of weird things. I'm just glad I got to say eyeballs on sticks.
Eyeballs on sticks.
Yeah, that's not what you heard me say. No. Russ was hearing something dirty.
Yeah.
That's not what I said. Eyeballs on sticks. It wasn't a Freudian slip, or maybe eyeballs on sticks is some kind of really bizarre Freudian.
Yep.
They're coming to take us away. Yeah, I hear the FCC knocking on the door. But so what started to develop as some of the things like CISSP or not CISSP, COBIT and some of these other frameworks started being developed by NIST was essentially they came down to what you really needed was a 3-part identifier. And the 3 parts of the identifier are something that you know, something that you are, and something that you have. And by combining those 3 things, they create a kind of crypto identity that theoretically, anyway, would actually create a kind of digital fingerprint about an individual. I mean, have you ever used anything like that?
I do, actually, to log into VPN at work. In fact, I was just sent a token today, and so it's bound to my phone.
Okay.
Right, which is something that I have.
Okay.
And it's sent to my email, so I know it's something that I know because I have to log into my email,
right.
So I need my password. And then something that I am, well, I'm just super cool. So
yeah, well, so that's 2 parts. So
all right,
something that you am is not quite there.
Am.
Right. The something that you am is not quite there.
You can't be cool.
So I was going to talk a little bit about all these different pieces of this stuff and continue to introduce you, our loyal viewers, to terminology that we can use to eventually talk about blockchains and cryptocurrencies and things like that. Because all this stuff is interrelated about how do we truly identify who something or someone actually is. And so one of the ways that stuff has been identified in the past is using hashes. And one of my sort of sci-fi ideas was if you could hash a person, you would end up, which would be very painful, by the way. But if you could hash someone, you would actually have a kind of unbreakable fingerprint that you could use. And some of the earliest hashes that we ever saw were called checksums. And so an early checksum was just take a file, take all the bits in the file, and add them up. And that number gives you a vague approach to identifying if something has changed or not. Now, it's not that. It's obviously, there's many, many ways to cheat at that, but that's still how TCP/IP networking validates packets, is using checksums. So they just add up all the bits.
The post office does that too. If you look at the bottom of your letters, you see a series of lines. They're essentially barcodes, and then the last digit's a checksum. So they add up all of the digits in that, and if that last digit of those numbers is not equal to the checksum value, it's not.
And then it's a misread, and they have to go in and manually process it. So that checksums are really good for things that are sort of self-validating too. So it's like, well, this doesn't make any sense. But they're not very good if you get into more sophisticated things, because they can create what are called collisions. So when you talk about hashing collisions, what you're talking about is the ability of a hash to be identical for two different things. And with checksums, that's a very easy one to do. So if you just took like a 4-bit checksum, 1011 adds up to the same thing as 1101. Now, so the bits are you know, maybe changed, but you've got a hashing collision, and now you've got a bit of a problem. But that's not why we use checksums. Other hashing algorithms that have come about are SHA-1, MD5 type hashes, and both these hashing mechanisms rely on algorithms to compute a string. So like an MD5 hash is, it converts any file into a 32-byte string of hex. And this is just done with mathematics, and it basically is a way that you end up creating a fingerprint of a file. It is possible to create collisions with MD5. It's difficult. But people have done it in labs. They've shown ways to beat MD5 hashes, and later they showed ways to beat SHA-1 hashes. Now, all these kind of hashing algorithms keep getting increased in strength. They keep getting increased in size. And as they go up in the number of bits used in the algorithm, they get stronger. And then, of course, people start focusing on breaking those particular things. So a hash then could be something that you have. So hashing of people has really revolved then around things like biometrics, and this is more up Russ's alley, because Russ, more than me, Russ is one of the people that wants to have like you know, the Borg eye. Although I'm pretty much there on that. I was talking to somebody about that yesterday. It was like, when they come out with, like, you know, some kind of like mechanical bug eyes, I'm going to be the first person in line.
Second, I'll be first.
Well, yeah, he'll be first, because I won't want to get up that early. That's how he gets everything first, because you have an iPhone X already, right?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, look right there. Yeah, see, I don't. Mine's ordered, but I don't have one yet, so I didn't want to.
That's because you got in late that night when we were ordering.
I did get in late that night. You're absolutely right. So yeah, that was why I didn't get mine. I had to order it the next morning when I got up there. We were at Wild West Hacking Fest when all that kind of stuff came up. So biometrics then became another kind of version of something that you are. And this is a kind of biological hash, if you will, of how to create this. And some of the earliest stuff that we used were fingerprints. And back in the night, and people don't realize it, they didn't use fingerprints until like the 1930s and 1940s. I think it was in the 30s was when they first started trying to introduce them into court. And one of the common questions you would hear in court, if you read old transcripts of those trials, was, how do you know that everybody's fingerprints are unique? And so this was another kind of hashing collision. So people were saying, well, is it possible that this is unique? Have you checked everybody on Earth that there's not another person? Because that's what a defense attorney would say. They say, well, your fingerprints were all over the murder weapon. And I go, it was just another person with my fingerprints. I mean, there could be one, right? You haven't checked everybody. And early on, you know, that kind of evidence was being treated as hearsay. It was getting tossed out, and it wasn't being allowed. But fingerprints have certainly been used as biometrics. And one of the first times I ever saw a palm scan used, which is another kind of fingerprint, it's a less detailed scan of your whole palm, was when I first went to college to get into the dining hall. They had this weird hand scanner, and I was curious if it actually worked, and we started trying to test it and got in some trouble for, you know, we never got so far as, like, you know, bringing in like a hand from a cadaver or something just to see what we could get away with. Yeah, I mean, I actually pursued that a little bit.
I'll have the hand sandwich.
Oh, yeah, there you go. I actually, where I went to college, they had a really famous forensic biologist who collected bodies and all kinds of stuff.
Oh, cool.
And, yeah, and I took a class, and like it was called human identification, and it was at night. And the first class, they brought like a cadaver in and pulled the sheet back, and people puked, and it was really cool. But I had worked at the morgue, so everything was okay.
Everything was
I was like,
okay.
yes, could I borrow that hand for a little while? You got a number 4 bone saw there? I could just take that. We'll bring it back later.
Yeah.
Promise. I'll keep it on ice or something.
Ugh.
But as we've seen these something you are start to evolve, that is a fairly good thing when it's used in combination with other parts of this 3-piece thing. So one of the ones that a lot of people have heard of are called retinal scans. Have you ever used a retinal scan?
I actually no. And because I mean, but again, we come back to the same problem: is how do we know that everybody in the world has a different retina?
Oh, apparently they do.
So, but I mean, it's also the same thing, just rehashing with a different type of anatomy.
And it does come down to the likelihood of a collision too. Right. So like if you say fingerprints, is it possible there's another person in the world somewhere that has the same fingerprints? Yeah, maybe it is. I don't know. But I mean, the likelihood is really, really, really low. So I think that's true on retinal scan. Does your GOES card have a retinal scan?
I don't remember having the retinal scan at the airport when I got it.
The one that I got was, I have a card called Clear, and I got it because it gets you bypass security at the airport, and it was an early form of GOES, TSA.
But it may, I don't know yet. Yeah.
No, that one does. So when I went to actually get my Clear card, they did a retinal scan, and they choose a biometric. So when you go to check in with your Clear card, it just randomly chooses. It can be 4 fingers, it can be 1 finger, it can be retinal. I've never had them ask me for the retinal scan though. They have the little reader there, but they've never. It's always fingers and whatever, and I've never had any problem. But I don't remember if GOES does it or not.
I don't remember either. We'll find out soon.
Well, yeah, we'll have to pay attention more next time.
Yeah. They also do another biometric that I've seen them playing with. I don't know if they use it wide scale now. Is thermal imaging. Yeah, they'll do a thermal image of body heat. But what I find interesting is that an individual's thermal signature changes. So how do they? Like, what algorithm are they using to say, oh, that's definitely Russ and not Doug, even though, various parts of our bodies may be hot or cold at different times. So
yeah, I haven't seen the one I saw doing that was in Hong Kong. They were shooting people getting off the plane. I didn't know what they were doing. They were holding up a gun and they were aiming it at people, and they were checking to see if you had a fever. And they were flagging people down, and it was like, whoa, what are they doing? I didn't even know what they were doing, and I had to look it up later. But when we got off a plane in Hong Kong, and they were aiming a little like gun at everybody. Iris scans is another one. That's a less intrusive, I guess, version. I've never had an iris scan done. I used to have to use a biometric when I worked in the laboratory, and they had a fingerprint scan that was inside your badge. So you had to put your badge in the reader and then you put your fingers on there, and that, along with them visually identifying you, was something they did. Because no matter how many times you went through the gate, they looked at it every single time. Other stuff, I had put some notes on there. One of my notes was weird patterns, which were things like thermal scans, facial recognition is now a big thing with the iPhone. So, and there's all these people trying to beat that to see if they can put masks on, they can put very vague looking things, and see if they can find ways around the thermal scan. There's a guy facial scan.
There's a guy working with a makeup artist for Hollywood in LA, and they've reconstructed a perfect one-to-one mock-up of the individual's face in plaster and then resin and then colored it. It still didn't beat the facial recognition.
Well, and again, I mean, some of that starts turning into, is it possible? Yes. Is it likely? No. I mean, okay, so now a guy shows up with a giant mask head on, and I was like, okay, wow, you beat my iPhone's security. And of course, the last one on the biometric list is DNA. And so
Gattaca.
Well, yeah, I said Gattaca, not Attica. That's a different one. Attica. Yeah. But Gattaca was an Ethan Hawke movie about this sort of world where everybody had to put drops of blood and everything all the time to verify their identity, so that every door you went through, everything was a way of tracking. He was a person that was like some kind of outcast, and
he had a genetic disease prohibiting him from working as an astronaut, I think it was, or something like
working as anything. Yeah, I think he was just a social outcast, and so he had these systems to beat the system. So it's kind of an interesting movie about beating biometrics. I don't think it would have worked if they had implemented a 3-part plan, but because they neglected some key things. One of my earliest things I ever said was, could you cut off thumbs? I actually asked a guy who made biometrics, could you cut off thumbs and put them on the scanner, and will people be running around with like strings of mummified thumbs so they can get through doors? And the guy from the biometrics place had a very interesting comment. He said, well, it actually detects body temperature.
Yeah.
And my immediate response was, so you'd need to carry a little microwave
heater. Yeah.
Just heat that baby right up, or keep it in some warm
boiling
water.
bag.
Yeah, keep it. Yeah, there
like
you go.
rice.
Seal-a-meal bags of thumbs. Yum yum. It's coming soon from beefinvolvement.com.
Oh, lean cuisine.
I should have put up a website. Oh, oh, that's just nasty. The second part of this was something you know, and the most common solution to this at this point is just passwords. When you if you combine them all. If you have all three of these things, a password is a pretty reasonable approach. Without all these other things, a password is really just a collection of letters which someone can guess, someone can get where you wrote it down on a Post-it note, or all these kind of ways around password protection. But I did just want to introduce like strong password idea to everybody. This is a very debatable concept.
Yeah.
As computing power goes up, it becomes easier to brute force, which means just literally guess the password by producing millions and millions and millions of combinations. The current sort of, I don't know, practice is 8-letter minimums with symbols, numbers, and characters mixed into them. So we're all pretty familiar with that by being forced to do it. The most recent review from NIST was that forcing people to change their passwords all the time was a bad idea. So NIST just did send that down because this thing, and everybody's complained about it, of having to change your password every 45 days or 30 days or whatever they change it to, meant people wrote their passwords down more, and they used easier to remember passwords, which meant that it was kind of a mess.
Or incremented them by one if there was a number involved.
So there were just these minor changes, and so these compromises became very sort of problematic. But NIST did this year release a report saying that they really felt that maybe that was a bad idea and that you shouldn't do that anymore. Instead, it's better to force people into models of either using passphrases, which are really nice. I mean, if you can remember a long phrase and mix that in with some symbols or something, it becomes a pretty strong password. At least I've tested some. And the longer, obviously, if you can type a whole paragraph, which gets kind of tedious, but at the same time, it becomes very difficult for people to guess. However, a passphrase is just a collection of dictionary words. So if you're going to use passphrases, you better come up with ways to do them very strong. You know, mix them with LEET, which doesn't really help.
LEET speak, yeah.
Well, most crackers now take that into account. So if you use dictionary words and your password used to be Lucky 7 and now it's, you know, oh, I picked one that doesn't have any LEET letters.
Well, you can have 3 instead of the E.
1 U-C-K. Well, there's no E in Lucky 7.
Yeah.
I guess you spell L-I-E. L is a 1, U-C-K, 1,
exclamation
3, 777, yeah, whatever, but it gets a little goofy. Don't use that stuff because it can be brute force just almost instantaneously. If you don't believe me, get a password cracker. You can buy them for $30. Put in passwords like Lucky 7 and watch how fast they get cracked with brute force, because they run a dictionary up front. So when we did forensics cracking, we had the Oxford Unabridged Dictionary was our first pass. And the Unabridged Dictionary is like this thick. It has every word theoretically in the English language in it. And it would crack most any dictionary word. And then by adding LEET to it, it just literally, it was just a hammer. And then after that, it has to start brute forcing. So now it's going A. And of course, the more you narrow that down and say, well, you know it's 8 long, you can start with 8 A's and see if somebody was really that stupid. And they are.
They are.
But obviously, the more information you have about passwords, so that's something you are. And all those things, then, the something you are, something you have, and something you know, kind of come together to be what we see today a lot, which is something like a key fob. So I have my keys. I have.
Oh, I have one too.
You have one
actually,
too? I have one.
Yeah, mine's gone.
So
yeah,
there's a key fob. Some of these plug in. The first ones of these that I set up were fobs.
This has one built in too.
Yeah, so now they'd use like Bluetooth or something, but the old ones, like what they would do is, we had one that you had to go to the company, you had to actually plug it into a port that was by the front door at least once a week.
Oh.
If you didn't plug it in after a week, the offset got so much that it would no longer work. And that the idea was that if people lose these things or people forget to come in or whatever, and then we ran into problems with people that were away for 2 weeks or they were sick or whatever, but then they had to reissue. They just had to bring it in and get it reset. But that thing was basically, you had to have the key fob. It had to be in the PC. Then once you did that, so that was the something you have. The something you know was a password piece of it. There was no something you are in that model, but it would have been nice if you had added a fingerprint scanner, and I've seen those now, a retinal scanner, facial recognition on the screen, or any of those kind of things they can throw up there. That's going to allow people to do very sophisticated things. So Russ is pulling out his credit card, so we can all have the number here.
Number's not on front. So
yeah,
thanks Amazon. But now the new cards, the new ATM cards have, but this one typically, or this one specifically has
a chip.
One of the chip sensors in it, and that was to combat skimmers and scanners at the airports or at ATMs. And now, so you need this physical card to take money out because it's got that chip in. Right?
But the next generation of these, which have already been released, actually have a fingerprint scanner. You put your thumb on there when you put it in. You put the chip in, it reads the hash on the chip, and then you actually put your thumbprint on there, and it reads your thumbprint at the same time. And so that's actually creating this three-part sort of thing. And then if you have to put a PIN number or something in at the same time, now you've got all three parts of that safe world. The last thing we're going to talk about real quickly is just to introduce the idea of what is called blockchain. And blockchain is a very sophisticated kind of problem where the blockchains are stored across a distributed network. And so what happens is you start a block, and that block has a hashed pointer to the next block, and the next block has a hash pointer back to the previous block. And these blocks get distributed all over to anybody that wants to store them. And what happens is whenever the information that's hashed into the block is updated, it is reflected across the entire blockchain, but it's all hashed, so no one can get into what's actually in there theoretically. And so what this is used for, it could be an identifier. So if there was a blockchain identifier that was like this, and I'm in possession of it because it was assigned to me, theoretically, that's a pretty good identifier. But again, there's a weakness. If this single thing is everything, all I have to do is lose it, and now somebody else is in possession of it, and it's all over. So again, even with those blockchain ideas, we're going to have the other two pieces of that world, because this something that you have, something you are, something you know, really is a pretty good plan for managing those things. And blockchains then sort of became the basis, and in fact, one of the first public blockchains was Bitcoin. Back in 2009, they had a blockchain that was out there, and those blockchains contain the owner's information. They contain, and I know people say, oh, it's anonymous, and it is, because nobody can actually decipher that information, but the blockchain can validate. So if you have your wallet available, then, and we're going to talk about cryptocurrencies next time, but if you have that blockchain information, then you essentially own that block, and it's you, and that way we can identify who it is. And that's kind of how cryptocurrency got started as a part of this whole thing. So it may be that something is coming out in the future where we're going to have blockchains as a method for identifying us. It probably is going to be something combined with some sort of biometric. That's what I would like to see, that it either has a fingerprint on it or with a password at the same time. All those things have to be there together. And of course, all this depends on how the blockchain's written and what kind of, if it's not written very well, then there's exploits and all these kind of things. But the theory of the blockchain is very sound, as long as the coders do their job and everybody keeps the thing secure. So, and any other
the only thing I would also add to that is, if it's a blockchain and we've got the hash pointers, what happens if one of the blocks goes down or somebody intentionally takes it down? How does that pointer move to the next in the chain
because it's
to validate?
Because it's a distributed network. So one block not being there, all the other blocks are still there, so you can still validate.
So it can still point to a
It's just like the
block.
internet. It's like saying, well, if this router goes down, there's all these other paths. Well, the blockchain is distributed across all these different nodes, and so the pointer doesn't just go to one place. It goes to all places. So it's a very sophisticated distributed system to allow us to validate these blocks. And if somebody compromises a block, that block becomes invalidated, and it's not really a big deal. I mean, I guess there will be probably then people talking about blockchain poisoning attacks, and there may already be people working. I'm sure there's people working on that because, wow, what can you imagine? But basically, that's where the cryptocurrency stuff kind of starts. And so hopefully that gave you some insight into some of the terminology and some of the crypto biometrics and crypto other stuff that's used to try to identify you. Be careful out there, because people are trying to steal your information, and they're trying to get around around the kind of things that you have so they can get into your stuff. And that's all from me. Russ?
Yeah. No, that's great, and we're going to be talking about some of the cryptocurrencies next week.
Yeah.
Bitcoin, Ethereum, and there are 21, 22 different types.
I found 32.
32 now.
That was just not even officially researching. I just literally found 32. So next time, cryptocurrency just for you out there in South Dakota. Okay, thanks for tuning in. See ya.